If you've ever watched a soccer match, you know that halftime break is, it's everything. It's 15 minutes to rest, to regroup.
Hmm.
But what if I told you that for the players' bodies, those 15 minutes are kind of a recipe for disaster?
It sounds strange, doesn't it, that rest could be a bad thing?
Exactly. So today, we are diving deep into that paradox. We're looking at what happens when athletes just sit still, what's called passive recovery, and why it so often leads to this massive performance drop just as the second half gets going.
And it's not just a theory. I mean, this is a real measurable problem that coaches have been trying to solve for years.
Right, so our mission is to break down some really fascinating new research that tackles this head-on. It asks, can a quick, really practical activity in that tiny window not only stop the slump, but maybe even boost performance?
And we've got the perfect source for this.
We do. We're basing this deep dive on an article called Elastic Bands During Half Squats as a re-warm-up strategy for youth soccer players' performance. It was just published this year, 2024, in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine.
The authors are Javier Sanchez-Sanchez and his team.
Yeah, and they looked at a super simple tool, the elastic looped band, to see if it could be the key for youth players. We're going to assess how it impacts things like jumping, sprinting, basically all the explosive stuff that wins games.
And the whole idea here is so critical because, passive recovery, or PAS, as the study calls it, it's a known performance killer.
Why, though? What's actually happening in the body?
It's all about temperature. The body cools down, and it cools down fast. Think of a car engine. Once you stop running it hard, it starts to get cold.
Okay.
And when muscle temperature drops, it messes with what we call neuromuscular function. Essentially, the signals from your brain telling your muscles to fire become slower, more sluggish.
So we're not just talking about feeling a little bit stiff. This is like a physical deficit.
Yeah.
You are measurably slower.
Oh, absolutely. Slower reaction times, less explosive power, and this happens right as the whistle blows for the second half, which is often the most important part of the match tactically.
Okay, so let's unpack that baseline problem first. What did this study actually confirm about the damage of just sitting around?
Well, the researchers set up a control, or con, which was the player's peak performance right at the end of the first half. Then they had them do passive rest PAS and tested them again.
And the result?
A clear, significant drop across the board. They measured all sorts of jumps, squat jumps, counter movement jumps, even on their non-dominant leg, and performance was way down compared to their baseline.
So if a player could jump, say, 20 inches at the 45-minute mark, they were jumping measurably less after 15 minutes of doing nothing.
Exactly. It's a guaranteed slump. And the biology is all tied to that temperature drop. When the muscle cools, it gets more viscous, thicker, basically, which slows down the actual muscle contractions.
Which is why this idea of reactivation is so important.
It's essential. It's not just a nice idea.
And I know people have tried all sorts of things, right? A quick jog, some calisthenics. I've even heard of weighted vests. But there isn't really a gold standard.
No, there's no consensus. And a lot of the proposed re-warm-ups or re-volley, they just aren't practical. You might not have space, you don't have equipment, especially for youth teams.
That's what makes this study's focus on a simple elastic band so smart.
It really is. They were looking for a microdose, something effective that you can do in a cramped locker room in just a few minutes.
So let's get into the design. They used 20 youth male players, around 15, 16 years old.
Yep. And they were playing at a pretty high developmental level. The study used a crossover design, which is great because it means every single athlete did every single condition over 4 different sessions.
So they all served as their own control.
Exactly. And the setup was always the same. A simulated first half, then a 10-minute recovery, and then the crucial 5-minute intervention period before they were tested again.
And that 5-minute window is key.
Mm-hmm.
That's a realistic amount of time a coach can spare.
It's the maximum, really, before you have to do tactics and get back out there.
So tell us about the 4 different things they tested in that 5-minute block.
Okay, so first was PAS, the passive rest. Just sitting. That's the negative control.
Doing nothing.
Right. Second was SQ, which was just a standard bodyweight half squat, an active intervention, but with no extra load.
Okay.
Then you have the 2 band conditions. SQT, which was a half squat with the elastic band around the size, and sequel, which was the same exercise but with the band placed lower down just above the ankles.
And the routine itself was really specific, wasn't it?
Very. It was 2 minutes of some light hip mobility drills, then 3 sets of 12 squats with just 30 seconds of rest between the sets. The whole goal was activation, not, making them tired.
And then they measured all the important stuff for soccer, jumps for power, a 20-meter sprint for speed, and the T-agility test for changing direction.
All the key performance indicators.
All right, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The big question. Was adding the elastic band actually necessary? I mean, isn't just doing bodyweight squats better than sitting?
That's the million-dollar question. And yes, moving is better than nothing. The bodyweight squat was better than passive rest. But the elastic bands were the real difference maker. SQT and SQL, the two band conditions, they didn't just outperform sitting still, they significantly outperformed the bodyweight only squats too.
Wow. So the resistance was the key ingredient.
It was. If you look at the jump results, for example, the counter movement jump, which is really important for sprinting power, was significantly higher after both band interventions than it was even at the end of the first half.
Wait, say that again? They jumped higher than they did at their peak in the first half.
That's right. They didn't just maintain performance, they actually enhanced it.
So this gets us into that whole concept of post-activation performance enhancement, or PPE.
Exactly. PPE is this fascinating temporary boost you can get. The idea is that a short, intense, but non-fatiguing activity can sort of prime the muscles to perform better right afterward.
And that used to be done with really heavy weights, right?
Yeah, traditionally, yes. But we're learning that this microdose of resistance from an elastic band can do something similar. It's enough to wake up the higher order motor units, the ones you need for explosive power, without causing fatigue.
So when you take the band off and go to sprint, those powerful motor units are already fired up and ready to go.
You got it. And that effect seems to peak right in that 6 to 10 minute window after the activity, which is perfect for the start of the second half.
That's a huge deal. It makes PPE accessible to literally anyone with a $10 band.
It's a game changer.
Okay, so let's shift to the most critical actions in a game. Sprinting and changing direction. Did the bands hold up there, and did it matter where the band was placed?
Yes, the bands were still way better. Both SQT and SQL led to much faster times in the 20-meter sprint and the T-agility test compared to both sitting still and the baseline performance. So the players were faster.
Okay, but you mentioned placement.
Yeah.
Thigh versus lower leg.
Right, and this is maybe the most important detail for coaches. The authors had a hypothesis that placing the band lower, around the ankles, that sequel, would be better than around the thigh.
And was it?
It was, specifically for speed and agility. Performance in both the sprint and the T-test was significantly better after the sequel condition than after the SQT one.
That seems counterintuitive. Why would putting a band farther down your leg make your sprints better? That feels like a hip movement.
It is, and that's exactly why it works. When the band is down by your ankles, your hip and glute muscles have to work much, much harder to keep your knees from collapsing inward during the squat.
Okay. It forces the big, powerful muscles to activate more.
Precisely. It shifts the emphasis of the exercise to the glutes and hips. And since those are the primary engines for sprinting and cutting, that heightened activation translates directly into faster times.
So, if we put this all together, active re-warm-up is non-negotiable. Bodyweight squats are good. But a 5-minute routine with an elastic band around the lower legs is the gold standard, at least for these youth players.
That's what the data says. The authors state pretty conclusively that using ELBs significantly enhances jumping, sprinting, and agility. It's an accessible, evidence-based tool that fits perfectly into the chaos of halftime.
Of course, no study is perfect. We have to talk about the limitations, which the authors were very clear about.
That's right. First, they didn't collect any physiological data. No heart rate, no core temperature, and crucially, no actual muscle temperature readings.
Why does that matter if we can see the performance improved?
It matters for confirming the why. We hypothesize it's because the bands kept the muscles warm and triggered PPE, but without measuring muscle temperature, we can't definitively prove that link. We know the result, but the mechanism is still an educated guess.
I see. And what was the other big one?
The biggest one for me is that they didn't measure performance during a second half. They tested immediately after the re-warm-up. So we know the players start the second half stronger, but we have no idea if that boost lasts for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or the whole 45.
Right. That longevity piece is a huge question for future research.
A vital one. And finally, we have to remember who this was tested on. These were 15 and 16-year-old developmental players. We can't just assume this exact protocol would work the same for a 30-year-old pro.
All great points. But the takeaway is still powerful. Sitting still is the worst thing you can do. And for these young athletes, a 5-minute simple band routine can completely flip the script, preventing that slump and even giving them a real performance edge.
Which brings up a final thought for you, our listener, to consider. If we know that an intervention this simple can so drastically reduce performance decline, what does that mean for injury prevention? How many non-contact muscle pulls in the second half could be avoided if an active rewarm-up wasn't just recommended, but was standard practice at every level of sport?
A really important question. This deep dive was based on excerpts from the 2024 article, Elastic Bands, during half squats as a re-warm-up strategy for youth soccer players' performance by Javier Sanchez and his colleagues, published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine. We definitely encourage you to find the full article and check out all the data for yourself.
For sure.
And if you enjoy this journey into sports science, make sure you hit that follow button and turn on your notifications. You won't want to miss our next deep dive into more fascinating